Patterns don't announce themselves. They don't arrive with warning signs or dramatic beginnings. They settle in quietly, repeating themselves until they feel normal, until you forget they were ever choices. I didn't know I was living inside a pattern for a long time. I thought I was being patient. I thought I was being understanding. I thought I was being strong. But that night, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't enduring a situation. I was repeating a cycle. If this story is touching you, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. The pattern always looked the same. Someone crossed the line. I noticed it, but said nothing. I explained it away in my head. I adjusted myself to avoid tension. Then came the quiet resentment. Not loud enough to confront, but heavy enough to carry. I would tell myself it wasn't worth addressing, that bringing it up would only complicate things. Eventually, the discomfort faded just enough for the cycle to reset, and then it happened again. Each time, I promised myself it would be the last. Each time, I believed I would speak up next time, when it was clearer, when it mattered more, when I was more prepared. But next time kept moving. The pattern didn't survive because it was powerful. It survived because it was familiar. Familiar discomfort feels safer than unfamiliar change. That night started like so many others. A familiar setting, a familiar tone, a moment that felt small on the surface but carried weight underneath. Something was said, casual, dismissive. The kind of comment that slides by unnoticed unless you've been collecting them for years. I felt the reaction immediately, the tightening in my chest, the pause before responding, the instinct to smooth it over. My body recognized the pattern before my mind did. And for the first time, I didn't move past that moment automatically. I stayed with it. I realized how predictable my response had become, not just to others, but to myself. How quickly I minimized my own discomfort. How easily I convinced myself to let it go. And suddenly, I saw the pattern clearly. Not as isolated moments, but as a loop. Silence, accommodation, resentment, reset. I understood then that nothing would change unless I interrupted it. Not later, not gradually, not politely. That night, the familiar urge to stay quiet rose up, but this time it felt unbearable, not because speaking up was easy, but because staying silent felt like betrayal. I took a breath. "I'm not okay with that," I said. The words didn't come out loud or dramatic. They came out steady, almost calm. The room shifted instantly. Surprise, a pause. That subtle recalibration people make when something unexpected happens. Normally, this is where I would retreat. I would soften my words, explain my intentions, reassure everyone that I wasn't upset. This time, I didn't. I let the silence stand. "What do you mean?" someone asked. And there it was, the moment the pattern usually reclaimed me. The invitation to explain, to justify, to shrink, but something inside me refused. "I mean exactly what I said," I replied. "That doesn't work for me. No apology, no backtracking, no negotiation." The pattern broke right there, not because they changed, because I did. The reaction wasn't explosive, but it was revealing. Discomfort surfaced, confusion, an attempt to move past it quickly, to return to familiar ground. I didn't follow. For the first time, I stayed present through the discomfort instead of escaping it. The conversation ended differently than it ever had before. Later that night, alone with my thoughts, the weight of what I had done settled in. I hadn't just spoken up. I had disrupted a cycle that depended on my silence. I realized something then. Patterns don't end when others understand you. They end when you stop participating. The days that followed felt strange. Not chaotic, but unfamiliar. I noticed moments where the old dynamic tried to reassert itself. Subtle comments, familiar expectations, small tests to see if I would slip back into my role. I didn't. Not forcefully, not defensively, just consistently. Each time I held my ground, the pattern weakened. Not because it was challenged, but because it was ignored. I began to notice how often I had been the glue holding unhealthy dynamics together. How much effort it took to maintain the cycle. Without that effort, things changed naturally. Some people adjusted, some became distant, some seemed unsettled. I let all of it happen. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to control the outcome. I was choosing integrity. Ending the pattern didn't make me fearless, it made me honest. I felt more present in my own body, less tense, less reactive. I stopped replaying conversations in my head, wondering what I should have said differently. I had said what mattered. That night became a reference point. Whenever I felt the pull of old habits, I remembered it. The calm, the clarity, the feeling of finally stepping out of a loop that had been draining me quietly for years. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in this story, ask yourself this: what pattern are you repeating just because it feels familiar? Because patterns don't end when circumstances change. They end when you choose differently, even once. I ended the pattern that night, and once you do that, there's no going back to pretending you don't see it.